She's also retiring. That's what I.
Oh, what happened?
She's not just like leaving, she's retiring.
Yeah, some like felt some nice thumb.
That's sobering. Want to go get a Band-Aid? Robin's got multitudes of them at the desk.
Not that you've never seen
wonder, like,
ever.
if we'll have
Nope.
students
No,
come
never.
because they've been like used to having that and they're not. Like it'd be an easy time to switch over since everything's changing for them.
Someone smells really good.
I know, I was
It's
thinking.
It's probably the hair looks too sweet. It's all curly.
Okay, just a question for you to think about. What was the Dust Bowl? How did it affect people? What did it affect? Where did it affect? Anything you can answer about that?
Miss Savage, I won't be here tomorrow. Is there any homework I should make up?
I'm not going to give you any homework over the weekend.
Okay.
But at least not for this class. For French, I'll probably have you read a short section of the book.
Okay.
Although, we're going to watch more of the film, so I'll let you know.
Okay.
Anything about that? I won't forget to throw it today. Thank you.
I wasn't sure if they met on ethnic or.
Yeah, this is we'll go over this one today. We'll put some up there.
I have like women and Africans and.
Yeah, that's fine. There'll be a lot of variety. There is a large variety, I should say, of groups that you could have chosen.
I figured I would do women.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. Yeah, definitely. I'll write it down for it. Let me during study hall, I'll make a little list and take it to you. Okay, all right. So let's start on talk about first of all, what was the Dust Bowl? It was one of the terms that asked for you to define. What was it? Bless you. Paige.
It was just a lot of drought and huge dust storms that came through from like Texas to North Dakota.
Yeah, good. So because of this huge drought that was going on during the time, obviously drought equals harsh land conditions, right? Or even like impenetrable land conditions. Nothing. Farmers couldn't grow anything. There just wasn't enough moisture in the ground. And so then eventually all of the soil and clay and dirt that's on the ground, if there's not enough moisture in it, the wind will pick up whatever's resting on the top that's super dry. So that's exactly what happened. So we had this horrible period of just this dust bowl where just dust is flying around in the air and settling on everything. And so when we talk about, you know, where did it affect, first of all, what did the book say? It named a couple of different states where the Dust Bowl was going on technically, but where all did it reach, Erin?
It extended from Texas to North Dakota.
Okay, so Texas to North Dakota, so a lot of kind of the middle Great Plains states, if we look like directly above Marnay's head. Okay, so right in this region here. But where else did it reach in the country? Olivia?
Well, it affected California because a lot of the people migrated over to California.
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, even though, you know, the dust itself wasn't reaching across the country, the effects of those areas essentially affected other parts of the country. So yeah, a lot of farmers decided, okay, we really can't make a living here in this region anymore, and so they decided to move out west to California. So then California is bombarded with like 1 million new people during this time, which is huge. The book even mentioned that the Dust Bowl affected ships. Like, the dust reached so far that it affected ships. So obviously, logically, if you think about this area of the country where it's going on, the closest water would be the Great Lakes, which is probably the region that they're referring to. But even so, it's still reached through several states in order to get to like Lake Michigan, for example. So that's pretty crazy. Any other effects of the Dust Bowl? It obviously directly affects farmers. They can't get anything out of their land. Their land's useless. Maddie?
Well, there's probably like a shortage of food because that's where a lot of food.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So no crop production going on means that we have a food shortage across the whole country. Because, you know, people on both the East and West Coast are getting crops from the heartland of America, from the Great Plains, where all of this food is being produced. Okay, good. Anything else? All right. So let's look at number 2 then. I had a couple of questions on this. It says, in a chart, list at least 3 groups of people and the effects that the Great Depression had on them. So this is rather broad, so really you could have chosen you could have chosen a gender to describe, you could have chosen an ethnicity or an age group. So let's just put a few ideas up here, and we'll put the group and some possible effects from the Great Depression. Let's see here. Okay, so let me get some ideas from you. What was one group that you picked, Mac?
I put Latinos. They, like, the whites were trying to push them out because they didn't have enough jobs. And so, like, they just wanted to call them pretty much.
Yeah. Like we've seen before in history, during any time of hardship, people tend to latch on and blame certain groups of people, usually for no valid reason at all. Reasons were made up. But yeah, in this particular instance, everyone was losing jobs, and so some people still have this feeling today that you know, Latinos were taking up jobs that could be going to white people, white men especially. And so the government actually deported a number of Latin Americans, even ones who were born in the United States and were technically Americans. So that was not a smart move on the part of the United States government. There was a big backlash from that. Yeah, Aaron?
One that I said was stockholders, and the effect kind of the Great Depression was that they lost pretty much all their money that they technically didn't have in the first place.
Yeah, right, okay. And some of these guys did have a big, vast fortune. They were able to do well in the stock market, but only a very small percent. Yeah, so you're right, stockholders, we'll put it due to stock crash. And just weak finances, a weak banking system during that time, the use of credit, overuse of credit. Okay, that was a good group to pick as well. What's another group that you had, Paige?
Farmers.
Good. How are farmers affected?
They lost a lot of the farms through foreclosure, and they didn't have money, so then they had to turn to tenant farming, and it was really hard to make a money after that, because you're also paying rent.
Yeah. And let's take just a second and define what foreclosure is, and also a reminder of what tenant farming is. Tenant farming we saw come up in the mid-1800s down in the South on the plantations. What does tenant farming mean exactly? Does anybody remember? Or maybe you would wager a guess based on the context here.
I
Paige?
should guess.
Yeah.
So like you'd be working on someone else's land, so they provide it for you, which means whatever you get, like you have to give them a certain percent, was like
Yep.
the old one, so then I guess now we just have to pay them money in order to use their land.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so if you can't afford to keep up your own farm, then you could essentially go and find another farm. Maybe that farmer had, you know, more money, more assets, and you would stay on his land and work for him. And like Paige said, a percentage of what you brought in would go back to that farmer who owned the farm. So essentially you're kind of, it's not like you're a slave or anything like that, but you're definitely indebted to another person, which is not a preferable way to live. So, but again, during this time people were doing anything they could to get money. So, and then sort of before this, before reverting then to tenant farming, what happened was that the bank foreclosed on a lot of farms, meaning that, does anyone know what foreclosure is? You've heard the term, probably. Okay. So foreclosure means that if you buy a home and you take out a mortgage, which is just a loan basically from the bank. Okay, this is the bank. Very crude drawing here. This is your house. Okay. So you are paying out each month money that's going to the bank, and you're in debt. Most people take out like a 15 or a 30-year mortgage. Probably a lot of your parents have mortgages, so they're going to be paying like kind of like a monthly rent on their home for the next 15 or 30 years until they pay off the whole cost of their house, right? Because homes are expensive, right? $100,000, $150,000, $200,000, you know, up to $1 million. And so what happened was that, let's say this is a farmhouse, they're not making any income, so they're not paying anything now to the bank. The bank is relying on this house's money, though, in order to keep up their numbers. So actually the bank reaches out and they just take hold of this house and it becomes bank property and essentially government property. So when somebody says that their house is about to get foreclosed, it's because they can't afford to pay the mortgage on the home, or they can't afford to pay, well, yeah, mortgage, basically. Okay, so, good. What else? Who else besides farmers? Yeah, Olivia?
I put city dwellers.
Yeah, that's a good group too. Okay, what did you say about them?
The unemployment led to homeless and starving.
Good, and we said yesterday that during the Great Depression, we had a 25% unemployment rate, so 1 in every 4 people did not have a job. Very high unemployment rate. Okay. Good. Other groups? Yeah, Lauren?
It's kind of like Latinos, but I had African Americans, and like racial violence was like a lot more because, again, the like white people didn't want to compete with them for the jobs.
Right. And I thought that it was sort of interesting and sad that there was a quote from an African American man in this section, and he talks about how, you know, for African Americans, they've always been living in the Depression, right? Ever since they came over to America. And so during the Great Depression, since it affected all races, especially white people, everyone actually paid attention, and so it's sort of depressing that no one was really that invested in African Americans beforehand until we had this huge thing. But for a lot of people, it really wasn't any worse than their original living conditions, so. Okay, good. Any other different groups that anybody else had? Oh, I saw a couple of people had women. We'll add them over here as well. What was going on with women during this time? How are they affected? Paige?
There was a lot like African Americans and Latinos where they were just kind of resented because they had jobs and they felt like the white men should have them before the women did because they were like the primary caretakers of the family.
Yeah. Resented is a really good word to use here. Okay. Good. Yeah, Lauren?
Oh, I was just gonna add another point.
Sure, yes, what else?
It talked about how they would work with their neighbors a lot on like buying like food for their families and like split stuff, and how like since the budgets were so tight, they kind of were in charge of managing it.
Yeah. Good. I'm curious, do any of you, your grandparents might not be quite old enough, but does anybody have grandparents who were living during the Depression? Okay. Has your grandparents told you any stories about how it was for them during the Depression? My grandpa did, all the time. Yeah, any you want to share? Mac?
Well, I know my great grandma, she told me that, like, when she said she was 18, when she got dentures, because they had no money for toothpaste.
Yes.
And so she,
Yeah. Oh gosh,
she's
wow.
like, a full set of teeth.
Yeah, that happened with my grandparents too. I think probably a lot of people in that generation, just dental care, is expensive and wasn't as widely available and all kinds of stuff. So yeah, Paige?
This is from my great grandpa actually, but he was actually kind of lucky with it. He apparently just didn't trust the bank, and so before happened, he'd taken like all of his money out of the bank, and so it wasn't invested in anymore. So he just kept it to himself, and then because of that, was pretty much okay throughout the Depression because he had all of his money kind of like under his own supervision and stuff. And so then he had like friends who would come to him like asking for help because their money was in the bank and they just didn't have anything.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was good for him.
Sure. Anything else, Olivia? What would you say?
My grandpa, he's the oldest of 12 kids, so he was always telling stories about like not wasting any food and like eating everything even if it's not good, like doesn't taste that good, you still have to eat it and stuff.
Yeah. Definitely. My grandpa, now some of this might have been exaggerated because he was known to do that for effect, for dramatic effect, but he said that when he was little, he came from a family of 10 children, and he was right in the middle, and he said that at night, he and his brothers used to share like the top floor of their house. They had this old farmhouse, and it was basically the attic. And he said that he could see the stars through like one winter, they had a hole in the roof, and they couldn't afford to patch it up, and so he would go to sleep shivering and had to look at the stars while he was going to sleep. So I think he was trying to make us more appreciative of the things that we had, probably. But then he also, something they did do, and I know this for a fact, is that they, since they lived on a farm and they were lucky enough to have apple trees on their land, they would go out and sell apples for a penny to neighbors and to try to get, at least a little bit of income. And I think that was pretty common, actually. I know there was a picture in this section of guys trying to sell apples for 5 cents here. So, and 5 years old going out with this barrel of apples, and so pretty crazy. There's also a lot of great photography that came out of this period, and the reason being that you could really capture the realness of it. And there's a picture of the woman here with her children. There's a very famous photo in National Geographic of a woman during the Great Depression, and I can't remember the name of the photographer now. Dorothy something, but anyway, it's one of the most famous photographs of all time, because it shows the desperation of her, and she's trying the best she can to feed her family and all of this stuff. So,
This one?
yes, it is that one. Thank you. What page is that on?
511.
511. I figured that they'd have it in here. Who's the photographer? Yeah, Dorothea Lange. That's right. Okay. Page 511. It's called Migrant Mother, captures the concern of a weary mother for her children. And this photo has been reproduced a lot. It's been altered by other artists, and it's just, it's very famous. It's kind of like the Mona Lisa now, but a modern version of that. Okay, another question that I had for you. Oh, Maddie, do you have a question first?
Oh, I was just gonna say a comment about the grandparents.
Yes, oh, go for it, go for it.
I feel like they really, like, since they went through the Depression, they, like what Olivia was saying about, like, food and stuff like that, like, they're very much, like, eat everything that's on your
Right,
plate. And just, like,
thrifty and.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. My great-grandma, like, she'll keep, if there's, like, one tiny sliver of chicken, like, she'll wrap it up in tinfoil and keep it. And it's like they save everything, which is, like, something that I think we kind of lack, because we haven't had to go through something like that, so.
Yes.
We're kind of
Yes.
wasteful.
To piggyback on that comment, a few years ago on, I don't know what show it was, probably Oprah or something, I was watching, and they had this group of people that they call themselves like green eaters or something like that, but they got most of their food from dumpsters, like food that people would throw out that was still good. You know, I mean, I don't know. I think that it's very risky to get food from a dumpster, because you don't know who had it in their possession, and you don't know what animals might have gone across it at some point, you know. So even if it looks good, obviously, you know, bacteria exists and things like that. But it was very, very interesting, and I thought to myself, geez, only in America could we have like a whole group of people formed who just feed on other people's trash. Like that's very, like they make the conscious decision to do it too. So it's not like all these people were destitute and they had to resort to eating other people's trash. They decided to do it. It was like an ethical decision for them. So they were trying to essentially eliminate some of the waste that America was creating. So anyway, that reminded me of that story. But Marie, you had your hand up, and then Holly.
Oh, I was just gonna say my great grandma, she lived through the Depression, and one thing that she did was like the plastic Ziploc baggies. She would wash them, and she my mom spent a lot of time with her, and so she like made my mom do that, and my mom still does it. But yeah, my mom has a lot of things that she like does because of her grandma.
Yeah.
And so it's neat to see how it has affected us.
Yeah, that's interesting.
To carry on with your comment about the green eaters, I was watching Food Network, and the challenge was to make food from things in so they had to make like this gourmet meal.
Wow.
And it was really interesting to see like how much food we waste. Like America wastes so much food, and like there were like apples sitting on the ground that were perfectly fine, but they throw them away because you can't give someone like an apple that was in the dirt, or and it's just sad. And like especially gourmet markets, especially because there's one black spot on a banana. Oh, we cannot sell that.
Yeah.
We can't have our customers thinking that we're less than that. So it's just. It's sad.
Yeah, they have to have like the nice visual value or whatever they're displaying. Sure.
How Fresh Market is. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, that is. It's a beautiful store. Everything looks beautiful when you go in there, but at what cost, right? At what cost? How many bruised apples are they throwing out, right?
Yeah.
Which they could be donating, and maybe they do. Like I know that Panera at the end of every day with their baked goods, they always give their baked goods away. I think they give them to various charities in town because obviously they're going to go stale at the end of the night, so they can't resell them the next morning. But they're still good, for that, for the extent of the day. So That's nice, at least.
I was
to know.
talking to a restaurant owner and like they were saying that they have to throw away their leftovers and they can't like give them to shelters because if people get sick from their food, there's gonna be a lot of, you know.
They're liable for
yeah,
that,
they're very
sure.
liable for that, but so it's kind of this like, you don't know what to do,
Right.
cause
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sad.
So they have to throw it out. And of course, you don't want to get sick, you know. I mean, that I just cleaned out my refrigerator the other day and I thought, oh, you bought all of this stuff from the grocery store and you didn't eat all of it, and so now you have a block of cheese, a whole block of cheese that you didn't eat and it's moldy and you have to throw it out. Oh well, you know, that happens, I guess, but I always hate doing that. I always think, oh no, this is such a waste. So, okay. Good. And I have one last question that I wanted to discuss, and then we'll stop for today. The issue of homelessness is brought up in this chapter, and obviously there were a lot of homeless people, especially in the cities like Olivia mentioned. What is your impression of homelessness today? What do you think can be done about it? Why do you think it exists? What do you think, Paige?
I think one thing that I thought was interesting is like as we were reading through this chapter, and there was a little blurb about like homelessness in the 1930s versus today. But it's like the picture of the guy selling apples for $5. He's out of work, so yeah, he's out on the street, but he's doing something. Like he's offering to sell something, even though it's not a whole lot. Like he's still making an effort, and I feel like there are a lot of people out today, and I know like we don't know for sure, but
Sure.
there are a lot of people who do sit there and beg, and it doesn't seem like they're making a whole lot of an effort to like get back on their feet, anyways.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, sure. Holly?
Whenever I walked for the homeless, when was this? December, I don't remember. It was like it's the coldest night in winter, and it was freezing. And they were talking about how there's this man who died, and he didn't really, as Paige was saying, he didn't make the effort, and I feel like sometimes people do choose to be homeless just because of, you know, maybe they came back from the war and they have some PTSD or something like that, and they don't choose to change it, so they end up on the street, and sometimes they don't want help because they were talking about how they'll, you know, ask people who are homeless if they need help, or really, you know, they push them away, and, you know, and it's sad because this man was like sleeping under a bench and he, you know, died from the cold.
Yeah, I think sometimes pride, you know, can get in the way, and especially with men, you know, because up until now, and even now in society, you know, a man's job kind of defines him, right? And his worth is in what he does, and unfortunately a lot of times how much money he makes, you know, and how he can support himself and his family. And so if a man doesn't have a job and if he doesn't have a home, then that's sort of, you know, I think a lot of men feel like they've lost their sense of manness, you know, essentially. So it's hard maybe for them to take help from other people. They either want to do it on their own or they don't. They made the decision to acquiesce to their situation. Maddie?
Well, there are a lot of people that can't help being homeless too. Like, I feel like we hear about the stories that are like of people who it's like they choose to do it, I guess. But there's more that I don't know what I'm trying to say. But like with the military and like PTSD and stuff like that, like. Or, I don't know. It's a really hard topic because there are people who don't make an effort, but then maybe it's because they don't know how to make an effort. And
Or they can't.
Or they can't.
They can't, yeah.
Yeah, because
Right.
maybe you're so unstable, or maybe, you know, something, you can't do anything about that. So, and yeah, it's like if someone like asks me, hey, do you need help with that? Sometimes I'm like, oh no, I'm fine.
Right.
Just because I'm like, oh, I'm trying to be polite or something like that. So maybe that's what they're thinking too when they deny help.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to go in there and help them.
You're right.
I guess.
You're right. It's a very complex issue,
Yeah.
obviously, and like you have all said, no one can ever really know what's going on in the mind of this person and what happened to them in the past. So, you know, you can't presume to know if they've made a choice or not. But